As a leader, are you clear about your culture? Do you know how a culture really works and how to create one? If you're not 100% sure, then you want to join me with my next guest, the founder and CEO of Dream Culture, Shelly McElroy. Let's go.
Hi folks, welcome to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast by Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. In this podcast, Gary shares everything about servant leadership, service leadership, authentic leadership, how to create high performance cultures, service excellence and life balance. Here's your host, Gary Ryan.
Thank you again, Sienna, for your lovely introduction. Folks, as you know, I've got Shelly McElroy here, founder of Dream Culture. Shelly, welcome.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
We couldn't not have you on once I knew that you had your own business going after helping me out with Disruption Leadership Matters a few years ago now with a little bit of content about some great work that you were doing with a previous employer. But we won't be advertising them right now because we're going to focus on Dream Culture. What can you tell the folks out there tuning in either on YouTube or through their podcasts about, well, what is Dream Culture as your business?
Yeah, great question. So Dream Culture was created purely with the purpose. When the culture is not right in an organization, it can very quickly become a living nightmare. And I've had that experience hands-on, and the impact that when things aren't quite right at work, the ripple effect it can have on you, your family, your friends. And, you know, I think why I created it was I believe businesses can do better. Like that concept of, do you work to live or do you live to work? Often that line can become blurry because obviously we need the revenue and we need the income to do the things that we love to do with our family. And I think sometimes when that's not quite right, people have this fear that they're no longer employable or they've been somewhere for such a long time that they might not be as successful somewhere else, and there's this massive fear factor around change and roles, in particular with long tenure. But actually, if we can establish as a business what our dream culture is and really understand what makes people happy to come to work, yes, we want them to be challenged, we want to push them out of their comfort zone, absolutely, but we can do that in a very productive, professional, respectful way, as opposed to some of the toxic behaviors that we read about in the papers. And so I guess the purpose, it was created to help businesses and help leaders do that better, to be able to help their workforce do a better job.
And that's where definitely what you and I both do as industry colleagues is, you know, we're definitely aligned from that aspect, as you mentioned, about it does impact the home, what goes on at work. And
yeah.
And as your phrase was, workplaces can do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we're so caught in the rhythm of busy doing. Often it can be when a new member joins the team or somebody that has significant tenure, a really valued member of the team leaves, that we stop and go, ooh, what happened there? But actually we should be looking at that more regularly, and it should be part of our ways of working.
So what's one of the ways that you help leaders in particular become more conscious of their culture on a regular basis, Shelly?
Like the difficult questions, what's the elephant in the room? What do you think your team is thinking but not saying? And like kind of teasing that out a bit with them, not with the intent of any repercussions, but I do believe also with business, we can't help if we don't know. And safety is so important, both mentally, psychologically, physical at work, that if people don't feel safe to speak up, like you're going to get just people that are great at doing tasks. And I think anybody who sets up a business, their passion and their love for what they're doing can get diluted really quickly the bigger they grow. So I think really establishing what is it cultural wise that we are doing well. And what are those things? They might only be 1% of the time that kind of slide under the carpet that we know are there, that are actually holding us back as a team. And if you can get that conversation going, it's often a really enriching insight to help you develop that improvement.
So without naming names or giving away anyone, what might be an example of an elephant in the room that you have helped get from underneath that carpet
Yeah, I had one actually just last week. Somebody shared that like the elephant in the room was, yeah, you ask our opinion, but then you don't action anything we say. So why do we continue to share it? So there was this real reluctance to be forthcoming with thoughts, with ideas, but actually the reason was because they felt when they were asked they weren't heard, or and it was such an interesting conversation because the leader was like, but I did hear you. Like, it was heard. And it was like, yeah, but nothing was communicated. There was no. So sometimes I think just because it's heard, it doesn't mean what you did with it, or even clarifying, actually, that's not the route we're going now, but we're going to put that in the parking lot and look at it in 6 months' time. Like, no communication is communication.
Correct.
So sometimes it's, you know, or an idea got shut down, or an idea got heard and somebody else executed on their behalf. So there's sometimes a lot of complexities depending on the size of the teams, but there's been a fair few elephants in the room that we've uncovered.
And I mean, the simple message there is, though, when you're asking folk for input, you must cycle back, including when you can't do it. Like, it's okay, we can't do that, and here's why we can't do it now. Maybe we're never going to do it because that's actually not our wheelhouse, right? And so long as people, you know, people might not necessarily like in the moment to hear that, but at least you've closed the loop.
Yeah. And, you know, I always think about that expression, clarity is kind. And when you've left people sitting in the unknown, you know, sometimes you don't know often because we haven't had that conversation, but how much time have they spent thinking about it, processing it, percolating over it? Did I say it? Was I clear enough? You know, and actually, yeah, you were, but I never told you we weren't doing it.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're actually draining people's thought process, their energy. So have those conversations. They're courageous, they're frank, sometimes brutal, but I always feel people are better off in the long run to know where they stand, short-term pain, long-term gain.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that I'm finding a lot of leaders are having, and you just mentioned sometimes they're brutal in a respectful way. We're not advocating brutality in anything other than, but brutal honesty is like telling people the truth with backed on data and stuff like that. But there's a lot of reluctance from leaders at the moment that I'm experiencing to actually have those honest conversations because they're fearful that someone's going to report them for, you know, being applying too much pressure or something along those lines. Have you been picking that up with some of the work you've been doing?
I think because of the like general cost of living crisis and the inflation, you know, sometimes businesses aren't being transparent enough to say, actually, we're in a little bit of financial difficulty at the moment. This is how we plan on tackling it, but we need everybody on board, for fear that it's going to make people feel like they're going to be cut, or yeah, exactly. So we're actually, you know, sometimes for business owners, I love the concept, none of us are as smart as all of us. And actually, if you bring that problem to the team, they might have a little nugget of gold or an opportunity to explore that you haven't been able to think of from their perspective. So actually, a problem shared is a problem halved.
Oh, yes. And it's interesting, Shelley, that you should give an example about being open and transparent about the economic reality that the business might be in at any point in time, because that then helps people realize, well, you know, okay, it is up to us. Let's work together. Let's collaborate. It isn't just someone else's problem, because it's actually all of our problem. And having that courage and vulnerability of the leaders to actually be open about that is very, very powerful. And yet a lot of leaders think, well, no one really does that. Well, actually, yes, they do. It does happen. And human beings are, you know, we've got a history of banding together when the chips are down, and we've even got language and vernacular like that we can do it, but we've got to actually trust the team members with the truth.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, because we've hired these people for their expertise, their brains, their ideas, their previous experience, the value that they can add to the business. So why wouldn't you let them help when the going gets tough? You know, like genuinely, most people are willing to help.
Yes.
Like you might have something that it surprises you. Like people are really attracted to the opportunity of a 4-day week. Like some people might actually, I don't want to lose my job here, but I'm actually happy to do 4 days for the next 6 months. And that cost saving, but I'll continue to do my role as best we can in that time. And you don't know until you ask. And I think there's always another way.
Yeah, and look, there is examples. I know you and I have discussed Bob Chapman and Everybody Matters with the Barry Waymiller group, and they did that through the pandemic. They just said, righto, we're all in this together. We don't want any jobs to be lost, but we are economically being hit by what's happened globally. Here are all the various options. What are some options we haven't thought of that staff want to do? And they worked it out together. And they got side and actually grew at the back end of the pandemic because there was opportunity for them to acquire new businesses because they found a way to keep their talent while managing their costs at the same time. But everyone was transparent about it. And there's multiple examples of that happening back in the pandemic that lots of companies, big and small, did sorts of things.
And the biggest thing with that, Gary, the important focus of trust, like if I trust you with the numbers in the business, if I trust you to do your job, like that, most of the time when you share that, it's going to come back to you in spades. Like the people that weren't cutting COVID, that banded together like that, no doubt are probably majority still working in the same businesses. It's like, well, you stuck with me when the going was tough.
Yeah.
It's a give and take situation.
And another interesting factor with that is if culturally we've been sharing the numbers when things are good, it's not a surprise then that we're sharing the numbers when things are bad. Like sometimes part of the problem is the fear of sharing the numbers when it's going good contributes to the fear of sharing the numbers when it's not going so good. But it means that staff are operating in an economic vacuum, which isn't healthy.
Absolutely. And I think just, for anyone who is interested in that perhaps doesn't share their numbers, you are paying people to run your business. Let them do their job. Let them do their job. And if you're withholding that information for a fear factor on your own, you have to do the work, not them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like let's take that is it Jim Collins analogy? Let's take that analogy, look in the mirror, not at the window, and start blaming people. Let's have a good look at ourselves. What example are we setting? What tone are we setting?
Yeah.
But I often do an activity with leaders around, I work a lot in the hospitality space, and like frontline leaders or supervisors, getting them to find something that they can improve. And they get to look at the cost of goods and they get the finances. And, at that level, it's such a kind of privilege to be able to see how you're adding value as you're stepping up the ladder. And the things that they come up with are groundbreaking and often executed as a result, because they're looking at it from what they see in their role, which can be perceived as a lower level, but actually who knows that level of the business better than the people in it?
Yeah.
So if we can get that filtered up, like things like one supervisor that I worked with was like, they got many venues. I think they had 17 venues. And they said, why are we buying napkins off 17 different suppliers? Why don't we just bulk buy off one and see if we can get a better deal? So, and that came, and it was like, oh my God, we've been so busy in the doing that everyone was operating in their own silos. It was like, we need to look at procurement. And it actually had like a multi-million-dollar ripple effect from that one idea.
Yeah.
So I think like play to your team's strengths, ask their opinion. What are they seeing? What are they observing in their work, and learn from it. Be open to it. You don't know it all. You can never know it all.
Peter Drucker, his advice for decades was stop sitting in your boardroom and discussing these things. Go to your front line and ask them, what are the solutions to the problems you're facing? And they will have answers. Like get out of the boardroom, get out of the executive suite and go and ask them, because they will have ideas. Like, why are we buying from 17 different providers?
It seems crazy, doesn't it?
It does. Now, a slight change of tack here. Given you're now heading towards your second birthday of Dream Culture, what of the journey to start your own business are you happy to share with the audience? Because I always find that fascinating, and also want to recognize the courage required to give up the employment world to go down the path of, hey, I now have to find every person that I work with, every company that I supply my services to, so I can earn money to continue to do what I want to do with my family. What can you share with that?
Yeah. And I think that courage is definitely not kind of for myself, but for all people that take the risk. Like it's such a risk. And I think like my imposter syndrome certainly came to the table in different lights. And it was actually the kind of big push at the end was actually from my husband, who was amazing. And I was in corporate, and really, really great job. To be frank, it was the highest salary I'd ever been on. It was work-life balance was brilliant. I had the flexibility at working from home. And in my head, I was like, am I crazy giving this up to the unknown? Like, but I had a couple of things, you know, when you think that's a bit of a sign, that's a bit of a sign. I had a couple of things literally fall on my lap. Like, I had an opportunity for a speaking gig that I turned down. I had an opportunity for a 12-month contract that I turned down. Something else came along. And my husband was like, if you get one more slap in the face that this is what you need to be doing, he was like, come on. And I was like, oh, but what if it's not successful? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? And he was like, and what if it doesn't? And it was that conversation. I was like, right, let's go. And I was like, if we're eating beans and toast for the next year, we're all in this together. But he was like, his advice to me was, if you've worked as hard as you've worked for every business that you've worked for in your career, this will not fail.
Yes.
And it was kind of just that kind of gave me the confidence to be like, well, actually, you're right. I do work. We've got a really good work ethic. Irish people in general work pretty hard. So I think it was a good kick up the backside. And then the other kind of piece of advice for anyone who's on the fence with it, like, I was kind of waiting for this moment where I felt ready. I still sometimes don't feel ready, and I'm almost 2 years in. So like, push yourself off the edge, go before you're ready, and nearly like test it a little bit. Like I love, I spoke with a guy a few weeks ago from Tesla, and one of their core principles was stay scrappy. And what that meant was, like, when you're 70% or 80% ready, just give it a good crack and like take the learnings, make the observations, adapt, adjust. And the example that we spoke about was when Tesla were creating the monster truck, they weren't sure if there was a market for it. So what they did very, very cleverly was put it out in America. They said, we're thinking of creating this monster truck. What we're asking you for, if you have expression of interest in this product, is $100.
Yes.
And over 1 million people paid $100.
Correct. That is correct.
And that, like, so you know what I mean? Like, capture some data, how you can use that analogy in your head. Like, actually, if I've got 2 clients, like, that's actually enough, and the rest I can build, you know? So it's going before you're ready. And I think just always that open mind to learn from your mistakes, to pivot. You've got knockbacks in your job when you're working safely for an employer. Take them as you would, like, you know, take the learnings from them and try again. If you can take that mindset with your business and not let it completely knock you over, you're going to be all right.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, your Tesla example is really powerful, including for people running their own consultancies, is get your idea to the market as quickly as possible. Let people know this is what I'm doing. And, you know, you'd be surprised. Oh, people will engage you. Like, you know, when you got a bit of a track record in the corporate world, it's amazing how that can happen. And it's like, okay, even if I'm not completely clear on my idea, like the you know, that became the Cybertruck, just get it out to the market and test the market's interest. So you can, I'm thinking about running my own business. If I did, what would that, that's literally what I did. I literally went to people and said, yeah, because we'd been doing consulting work for internally in another organization, but that was closing down. That wasn't going to exist anymore. But because of my relationships with the people that I've been serving, I just went and said, hey, look, that's shutting down, which some of them knew, some of them didn't. But I let them know that's closing, that's ending for a whole bunch of different reasons. I'm setting up my own business. If I did, would you come? I'm not going to be that brand anymore. I'm going to be this brand, Organizations That Matter. Would you come? And they went, yeah. And I said, and the prices are going to be different because you're not going to get the internal mate rates anymore. Would you still come? And they went, how much? And I told them, I go, yeah. So I knew I had a business. So like even literally before I'd formally set up the business, I knew I had a business, and it was like, giddy up, let's go.
Let's go.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
And I think that's a really good point that you mentioned, like those relationships that you have, like put them to the test, you know, and if you've over the course of your career, if you've been good at building relationships and connecting with people, and, you know, people want to work with people that they like. So sometimes it's so funny. I have actually worked with my husband 5 times in 5 different organizations in different shapes and forms. And it's like, it's where we met. It's actually, I had just signed a contract with a hospitality company, and they were looking for a group general manager. And the owner was like, would you happen to know anyone in your circle? And I was like, actually, I do. So then the leadership program started, and my husband's like one of the participants. I was like, oh gosh. But it was actually, you know, it's that circle of who you know, that you know, all those people that were in that leadership program, 2 or 3 have gone on to different businesses and have taken me with them. You know, so it's, if you can make those great connections, be there to help people when the going gets tough, be there to support them when things are going great. There's nobody else that they're going to call.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we call it the power base that you just mentioned. Is the people that you already know are your power base. And you know, it's funny. I think in Australian culture, a lot of people are scared to leverage their power base.
Yeah.
But that's where you have to go. People that know you, trust you, worked with you, know that you're going to produce, and you got to let them know what you're doing. And you'd be surprised, as you've discovered. Well, not surprised in your case because you knew to do it, but for folk that are sitting on the fence, as you described earlier, Shelly, it's like, well, that's where you go. Let people know as quickly as possible. That's the same as saying put $100 down. Just let them know what you're doing, and people will come and say, hey, you know, we're doing it. Now you've got an extra complication that possibly, and being a mum. So for all the mums and dads out there that have got young kids that are thinking about this, and you know they were at a tricky age to potentially for you to make this call. Like, how did you handle that part? You know, and as you said, your husband's going, "Come on, Shelly, let's go. I'll back you." That's awesome. Like, that's unbelievably powerful, no doubt. But yeah, how did you cope with that issue of I've got these young kids?
Yeah, and actually it's an interesting one because so Alfie is now 8 years old and Evie Rose is 4. So at the time they would have been like almost 2-ish and 6-ish.
Yeah.
So it's a young age. Like there's 11 weeks school holidays in the year, and even if both of us go simultaneously, it doesn't cover it. And all our family is overseas, so that's another obstacle for a different conversation. But actually, it's been incredibly empowering with the business and the flexibility that has created. So it's been able to, like, even in my old jobs, like I never would have gone, you know, things like, and I actually feel terrible as a mum saying this, but like the Easter hat parade, they're always at like 2 o'clock and you're like, oh, it's just right in the middle of when we have our weekly meeting, and you miss those types of things. Whereas now, actually, if I know that that's coming up, I block it off, and it's priority number 1, because I was like, they need one of us to show up for them. We're not going to both be there at everything, but it's given that flexibility to really prioritize those big rocks. And that's not to say it's easy. There's days where sometimes they're in before school care and after school care, and it's a long day for them and it's a long day for us, and you get back and you're like, oh my god, now you're into showers, bath, dinner, you know, the whole lot. So it is quite a juggle. But I think, you know, at times working for somebody else, I felt like I wasn't a good parent and I wasn't a good employee. And actually now I feel like I have a bit more control on that. And you know, sometimes we'll sit together like just for 10 minutes on a Sunday and be like, right, what's the week looking like and who's doing drop off on this day? And actually I'm at a client dinner that night and they will have football or something else on. And it's just that it's literally like, and this is, I try not to bring work home, but it's literally like having the conversations at work in your households.
Yeah.
Get that plan together, work as a team. And actually, like, what are those big rocks for you that you really want to prioritize? And also, what are the big rocks for them that you then step in and support?
Mm.
But it can be hard. And sometimes when the kids go to bed or whatever, the laptop comes back out and those boundaries between work and home can get a bit blurred. But it's being self-aware of them, and when I'm with the kids, I do try. I'm not perfect at it, but I do try be present. So that might mean the phone and the computer goes in a different room. We'll take out the paints or we'll go out the back for a game of football, and it's just making sure, because we're in this age that tech is kind of disrupting how we operate. And you know, there's a great book, The Stolen Focus, and I sometimes see myself, I'm in conversations and I've looked at a text and I've quickly read an email and I'm reading the sign behind your head, and it's all gone on so quickly that humans apparently our attention span is becoming 7 seconds, just like goldfish. It's literally declining rapidly. So what are the things for you as a leader, both personally and professionally, that you want your focus to be on?
Yeah.
And, you know, make yourself accountable to that, and all of a sudden then you start to be able to navigate just that little bit smoother. But it's to not compromise on the things you don't want to compromise on, I think, is important. Yeah,
and you're really practicing what you preach at home, really, about the culture at home there too. And
absolutely.
One of the key parts of the freedom that comes with running your own show is the control over your calendar, because that's really fundamentally what you're describing there. Is if we've got something important with the kids coming up and I'm available, I block it in. Now, if a client wants me at that time, I now have a choice to make, but it's my choice. I'm available or I'm not available. Currently, I'm not available. Now, if it turned out that your partner can cover and they're happy to do that, and you've still got that presence for the children, then you can make that call. Or if that can't happen, you go, I'm just not available. So what I've found fascinating over now my 18th year of running my business is clients will adjust to your availability because they don't expect you to be available in the first place, actually. like, because you get to negotiate that. Whereas when you're an employee, you don't get to negotiate that. You have to be there.
Your role, that's your responsibility. Yeah, 100%. And I think with that as well, like, it's nearly cutting yourself a little bit of slack. Like everyone puts that pressure on themselves to do both roles perfectly, and I haven't met anyone who's nailing it, you know. So it's like, just what are the, apart from you, Gary, what are the things that you know, if you want to be there for the school holidays, but that kind of legacy piece of leadership, you know, and it is a bit morbid, but when people are close to end of life, they never say, gosh, I wish I worked a bit harder. You know, it's like, it's often that case of, I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I spent more time with my friends. So if you kind of know that that's where you're heading, do something about it.
Yes, 100%.
So it's a good reminder, you know, and I think sometimes I've a friend who recently left a business after 14 years, and she's like, I was just replaced. I was like, yeah, but what? Like, someone has to do your work. Like, what did you expect? And it was like, I just didn't think I was as quickly to be replaceable. Like, I was like, well, you've had a massive impact, but that role still has to go on. So it's that kind of circular business economy. Like, not that not that expression that everybody's replaceable, but that role and responsibility has to be covered no matter who's doing it.
Oh yeah, and look, it is. I think it is accurate that organisations are about the people that are there at any particular point in time, right? And it's to me the similarity or the simile is, if you've ever been involved, like I've coached a local football team, right? And all the clubs that I played for in my athletic prime. When I go back to those clubs, the club is not the same club as it was when I was there. It's a whole different group. Yes, the name's the same. Yes, the honor boards are similar, but there's more now, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's not the same club because the people are different.
Yeah.
And I'm just a memory. Like, that's the truth. I'm a memory, a fond memory by some, but for a lot of people, it's who's that dude? Like, it's just how it is. You know, hopefully we're off in the present making an impact with whatever, like with your friend, whatever that new role that they're moving into is. They're now part of that group of human beings to make that impact. It's just the reality of how the world works. Now, I'm interested, you know, when you get to come on an opportunity like this with a different audience, you know, what other than what you've already shared about dream culture, is there any one particular message that you're like, you know what, every chance I get, I want to make sure this message gets across about culture? Is there anything like that for you, Shelly?
Yes. Put the value on culture that you put on your P&L.
Yeah, wow.
Because the value that the culture brings, like I've had it in meetings where directors have been like, oh, this is kind of the fluffy stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, you've no idea. Like, if you don't have this right, the actual cost to your bottom line is detrimental. And there was an article, I think it was from last October, it was a $380,000 fine for a toxic workplace culture and the ripple effect that had on an employee, and very, very shocking circumstances with the impact it had on their well-being. But you know, that went to court. That was seen as it can cost you more than anything, like your reputation, your brand, like that business is ruined if that culture is toxic. So we sometimes focus all our energy on the actual facts of the P&L, whereas let's nearly have a P&L for our team in a way. Like, what's the cultural facts? Like, how do people feel coming into work? How are they performing? What's the chemistry like? If you observe a meeting, you know, sometimes I'll notice things on the very first session, little subtle things like people will turn their head away when a particular person talks, or they might roll their eyes, body language cues. Like, culturally, what message is that saying? I don't have respect for you, or I'm not interested in what you're saying. So, and actually teams can find a way to work around that rather than be like, hey, actually that's a bit out of line, or that's not aligned with our values, or I wouldn't like to be treated like that by you. You know, what's going on? How can I support you with this? What's your plan to tackle this issue? Like, I think you can have culture by design or culture by default. And a lot of businesses settle for culture by default, and nearly it's like, well, you get what you get. And you have to put the work in for it to be sustainable culture, to be a place that actually people want to work.
But Shelley, when you walk in the foyer, we've got the vision and the mission, we've got that all up on the walls. That's all there. In most rooms, we've got the vision statement and or a value. We've got a value. In fact, we even called their rooms a value by one of them. So we've got the respect room and we've got the care room. So isn't that all we need to really do? Isn't that enough?
And Gary, it's so interesting, like, and sometimes just reframing a question, you know, like I'll often ask leaders, if I was to join your organization, and they can often tell you what the values are. We're collaborative, we're respectful, we act with integrity. Yeah, great. Can you tell me about how you tackled a situation in the business where a person was not acting with integrity? Oh, we put them on performance management. Okay. What was the conversation like? What was it? So again, you get a sense of the culture, and you get a test of, is this really clear? Because the other thing as well with cultures, you know, we often in business, we're a diverse bunch of people. Even sometimes I've had miscommunications. I once went into a meeting. I was a new general manager at the time, and I put on the bottom of an email, like it was the agenda, and I said, let's get ready, take off your shoes and give it socks, which is a bit of an Irish expression for like, let's go. And when I went to the meeting, so the first time meeting the whole team, the executive chef, they all came in barefoot. I'm not joking you. And I was like, why's everyone wearing no shoes? And one of the managers was like, because you told us to take off our shoes to give it socks. And I was like, oh my God, not literally. Like, you can't. So communication, but when you've got diverse cultures, you have to spell it out really clearly. And one thing that has been really successful recently is, you know, if you have that, say, a value of accountability, being really clear and spelling out what that is, but also being really clear and spelling out examples where we've seen it in business of what that isn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've stuffed up, I blame Gary. That's, you know, what is it not? And you have to remember, not everyone's first language is English. You have to, you know, try and include and embrace the culture that you have. So make that as simple and as dummy proof as possible. And I mean that with the utmost respect.
Yes. And like you said earlier in the conversation, clarity is kind. And that whole answer was about lots of specific examples of how clarity is kind, because it is. But that's the piece of the puzzle that's nearly always missing, is just that lack of clarity.
Yeah. And it, unfortunately, often, and this is not like anybody specific, but often the leaders get away with stuff that the team might not get away with, or the person who's worked in the business 20 years can do what they want, but everyone else has to abide by a different code of rules. Like, again, if we have utmost clarity on what the culture is, that goes for everybody, whether you're the CEO or you're the bin cleaner. Like, it should not matter. It should be the same set of standards. And again, if you can honor that as best you can, and we're all going to make mistakes, if you can honor that and be willing to kind of put your hand up when you get it wrong, but actually recognize people when they do it well, like a pat on the back or a public call out or a congratulations on Teams, whatever it might be, and then respectfully and professionally challenge those when they miss the mark, you know, and ask for that feedback on how you're going with that, because we all have blind spots also.
Oh, that's right. We've got to, you know, and that willingness to model the feedback receiving is so powerful, and I find in a lot of my coaching, that's an area we always have to work on, is helping coach the leaders to be more open to receiving more feedback and understanding you're going to get told some stuff that sometimes isn't about you. It's the classic, someone's just telling you how you should be more like them, but you got to be mature enough and comfortable enough in your own skin to actually know that that's what's going. But equally, you can't be thinking everything they're all telling you is not about you. That's false as well.
It's a difficult one to navigate for sure.
Yeah. So wrapping up with our conversation, we always like to end with this question. So what does moving beyond being good mean to you, Shelly?
Oh, it's a great question. I think like I'm a genuine, I love learning, and moving beyond good is progressive improvements, continuous improvements. And when you feel yourself occasionally being stagnant, shake it up. Shake it up, because you know, sometimes in uncomfortable we grow, and if we're in the if we're in the comfort zone, we're not in the learning zone.
Yeah.
And how do we get ourselves more actively in the learning zone? And just times in life, like you know, for those that maybe have a newborn linking back to being a parent, just times where you're like, I'm really happy being in the comfort zone for the next 6 months. I just need to get through this. I have a child that's not sleeping, whatever it might be. But actually, once beyond that, like if you're on that career journey, like people generally don't want to be in the same position for years and years on end. You have to grow with the direction that the company's going, and like you've no excuse these days not to be learning. What are you reading? What podcasts are you listening to? What stories are you sharing? You can be a learner literally from your sitting room couch. Like, it's just being open to hearing what others have to say, finding those things that nearly irk a response in you, and there's probably something in that you're a bit uncomfortable with, and explore that a bit further. And then I think going beyond good personally, like the two greatest things we can do, whether you're a leader by title or a leader leading through how you act, is self-reflection and get feedback.
Yeah.
So that, you know, you're never too old not to self-reflect. You're never too young not to self-reflect. And what's the ripple of your presence? And, you know, sometimes you hear that expression of a leadership shadow. does the business get brighter when you walk in, or does it get brighter when you walk out?
What a way!
And that's a choice.
What a way to finish.
Mic drop.
That's a mic drop right there, folks. Boom. Does your organization get brighter, or does it get darker when you walk out? Now that is when you're walking in or out. That's a mic drop and a half. And there's so much in your response there, and that really covers that space of, once we start getting comfortable, that's probably there's a degree of comfort as human beings we need to sit in, but we can sit there for too long. And if we're going to be moving beyond being good, we've got to be prepared in a whole bunch of different ways that you've outlined, Shelly, to get out of that comfort zone and keep growing and keep learning. And as you really clearly articulated, there really is no excuse in this modern age for not learning.
No.
It's,
you can listen. A colleague put me onto Blinkist, which is an amazing app that condenses books. You can listen to the key points of a book in like 15 minutes. It's, or you've read a book that you just want to go over and you don't want to just read the back of it, download it on Blinkist. It's a brilliant way to get those key points, in particular in the leadership space and strategy space. You can really chew through a few of them over the weekend. So yeah, there's no excuse.
No excuse. I want to thank you for giving up your time to have a chat with us on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. Thanks, Shelly.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, folks, we've had Shelly McElroy, founder of Dream Culture. Go check it out. We'll have all the links and the bio in the show descriptions down below. Make sure that if you want to improve your leadership, you want to enhance your high performance culture, or you're after business growth, come and check us out at Organisations That Matter. We've got plenty of resources, plenty of bestsellers that you can see up above. There's even one to add to that list, and there's also another book coming out about a week after this episode will go live, actually. So we've got another one coming out as well. So, folks, make sure that you subscribe and like this episode, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye.